Brothers and sisters, the following speaker, Cameron Conaway, is an investigative journalist, a social justice poet, a former professional mixed martial arts fighter, a top 50 content marketing influencer, but most importantly, Cameron is a humanitarian. Being raised in a union household, Cameron has seen firsthand the importance of unions and the effects on the everyday lives of union members. Cameron's mother is a 30-year member of AFSCME, who happens to be sitting right back here. He has attended rallies for striking workers with his mother and I. He has walked the picket line with his mother and I in Altoona, Pennsylvania. He gets it. He understands our fight. Cameron began writing as an undergraduate at Penn State Altoona, where he earned his bachelor's degree in both criminal justice and English literature. While attending Penn State, Cameron had several mixed martial arts fights, professional fights, and he earned the moniker the Warrior Poet along the way. Upon graduation, he was awarded a full scholarship in the position of poet in residence at the University of Arizona's MFA in Creative Writing program. As a journalist, Cameron has covered sex trafficking in Cambodia, the global health crisis in India, inspiring new educational models in Ethiopia. He's reported from Thailand on efforts to combat malaria. He has been published in the Harvard Business Review, Newsweek, The Guardian, The Washington Post, the Stanford Social and Innovation Review, NPR's, among others. As a grantee of the Pulitzer Center on crisis reporting, he reported from India on how the Ganges River is dying from reckless pursuit of growth. For his efforts, Cameron was nominated by Newsweek for a National Magazine award for his essay, The River of Death. He's the author of 4 collections of poetry, each of which examines a critical social justice issue. Until You Make the Shore grew from his experience working in an all-female detention center in Arizona. Bone Mill explores singular elements of particular tragedies from Hurricane Katrina, the BP oil spill, the Rwandan genocide, among others. Malaria Poems was named the best book of 2014 by NPR and featured in the Washington Post. His most recent book of poems, Chittagong Poems and Essays, highlights the devastating conditions of child slavery and environmental degradation in the shipbreaking yards of Bangladesh. Again, he gets what we're all about. He understands that it's not only our duty, but our obligation to stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. As a content marketer, he was named a top 50 content marketing influencer by Top Rank. Cameron is certified through HubSpot, Hootsuite, and Content Marketing University. At Content Marketing World 2016, he presented journalism, content marketing, and shared worlds between. To help others explore the intersection of journalism and content marketing, Cameron curates Content Land, a weekly resource for journalists and content marketers who want to work smarter by learning how both fields intersect. Cameron currently serves as the content marketing manager at Clipfolio, a dashboard software company that helps thousands of SMBs and digital marketing leaders measure what matters and continuously monitor the health of their business. Brothers and sisters, I take great pleasure in introducing to you my son, Cameron Conaway.
This is a man who has spent 40 years of, for the most part, very thankless work standing up for workers. So it's kind of unbelievable that you introduced me, 2 years from now, can I introduce you? Can we, Jonathan? Can we? Okay, can you guys hear me? Man. All right, pull it together. Dearest brothers and sisters, thank you for having me here. It means the world to me, and I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity. Special thanks to Brother Bob Wood, Brother Jonathan Battaglia, for making this happen. I understand how much work went into it, and I'm super impressed with, as a marketer, very impressed by the branding, design. I look at that with a critical eye, and I just think it's the right direction. Fellow communicators, I don't have to tell you what we're up against. You, like me, likely feel your back against the wall. It's a wall that Mexico did not and will not pay for. It's a wall that forms a room in which those of us fortunate enough to live somewhere in the shrinking spectrum of the middle class must, as communicators, help amplify the voices of those around us while lending our hearts and hands to pull others up alongside us. It can be exhausting work, and it can be thankless work. It can be work that you're not even sure is actually work because you often can't see the results of it. Brothers and sisters, as we absorb the impact of wave after wave of a grotesquely incompetent and deleterious administration's anti-workers, anti-truth, and therefore anti-American agenda, keep this in mind. Underlying all of it is a battle of messaging and of reach, which means a battle of communication, which means your work right now is as important as it's ever been. To be clear, I truly mean a battle. Years ago, I had the opportunity to interview Arun Gandhi, the grandson of Mahatma Gandhi. He spoke to me about how the West understands physical violence as single acts of physical violence, but how his grandfather taught him that violence comes in many forms. He explained how there are more subtle forms of interpersonal, intrapersonal, and systemic forms of violence within and all around us, and how that sort of violence can be even worse and is what underlies the physical acts of violence we often view in silos. Causing a wave of terror that leads scared Americans to Google AHCA and pre-existing conditions, it's an act of violence. Implicitly banning Muslims from visiting our country, it's an act of violence. Using your pedestal to claim award-winning investigative journalists are the fake news, and banning them from attending a White House press briefing while inviting Breitbart and Fox News, that's an act of violence. Likewise, spreading anti-union propaganda and working to pass laws that make it more difficult for unions to sustain themselves is an act of violence. The roots of such violence run deep and influence us early. Take a look at our education system's textbooks, where Native American history has essentially been removed and replaced with the Christopher Columbus fairy tale. And how labor history is all but non-existent in these textbooks. But wouldn't you know it, most of them contain some kind of glorified fantasy of Henry Ford's story. These examples, too, are battles of messaging and of reach, which means battles of communication, which means your work right now is more important than ever. As violence comes in many forms, so too, as you all know, does communication. In these times, it is critical that each day we renew our radical commitment to both the silent, internal, but still influential forms of communication that we carry inside us and the external, public-facing communications work that many of us call our career. I urge you, in these times ahead when it feels our messaging of facts and critical thought is cast aside in favor of a junk food rhetoric that is built on small thinking and convenient lies, to renew your communication spirit by intentionally carving out time to reflect on those silent influencers in your own lives. I need to sniff, I'm sorry. Two of the three greatest influencers in my life are here today. Brother Bob Miller and my mother, Susan Conaway Miller. I want to take a moment to share a bit about both of them. As an introverted poet, I've been heavily influenced by the silent and humble communication efforts of the man who just introduced me. Many of you here, if you didn't already, now know of him as Brother Miller. But I know of him as the man who entered into my life before I was a teenager and when I was most desperate for a father figure. As a man who became the greatest role model a scared young boy could ask for. As a man who, over the years and after long days of pounding the concrete on the shop floors of F.L. Smith Machine Company in Duncansville, Pennsylvania, came home after work each day and showed a love and respect for my then single mother that I wish all boys in this world had the chance to see. At some point in his taking me in as a son I began to call him Nab rather than Bob. Our family, we don't have any idea how that happened, but we're all sure it was some kind of organic amalgamation of Bob and Dad plus an N. I don't know. My mother, shortly after high school, embarked on what would become a 35-year career at the Altoona Hospital in Altoona, Pennsylvania. A union-strong woman, she raised my sister and I for many years by herself, and while somehow putting in 16-hour days, often teaching us examples about radical empathy and fierce discipline that would mold us into the people we would become. And then there's my wife, Maggie Chesney, whose unwavering love and support has carried me through the many difficult times when I was traveling the world to write stories about human rights crises and yet struggled to collect a paycheck for those efforts. A standout soccer player in high school, Maggie has since endured nearly 15 years of knee surgeries, with her 9th coming up. She was in too much pain to join us here. But how inspiring is it, as she has dealt for so many years with her own suffering, that she decided to and then recently achieved a master's degree in international peace and conflict resolution so that she could help others with their suffering. Do you see the influencers I've had in my life? I hope I've been able to adequately explain to you how they've both forged and continue to renew my own spirit. So please, for just a moment and at the sound of the bell that I'll ring 3 times, I'd like to ask you to close your eyes and take a few deep breaths in, breathing in the energy of those silent influencers in your own life and of those silent influencers of years past who put their lives on the line so that we have the rights that we too often take for granted today. So I'm going to just ring this bell. I would just like you to bow your heads and take a moment. So gently come on back, because we have some work to do. So thanks in part to tech and what's being called the gig economy, long-standing stable careers are diminishing into little more than relics of a bygone era, while wages remain stagnant for the middle class, and while there's a severe lack of communication efforts to reach those of us, myself included, whose normal has been and will for the foreseeable future be volatile. This is a group, and I'll just throw it out there and say under 40 years of age, that is in need not of just experiencing IAM's messaging, but of feeling a raw, deep, guttural sense of connection to it. We have to believe that our individual and collective work, and this often means forging radically different ways forward, as you see with the journal, is bending the arc of justice toward a future we want for ourselves and for those in that gig economy, even if that bending is so incremental as to be imperceptible. Again, as a fellow communicator, I come back to story to renew this belief. I've had the privilege to travel to the notorious shipbreaking yards of Chittagong, Bangladesh, where small boys are forced into modern slavery and asked to use crude tools, damn near as heavy as they are, to break down the wealthy Western world's vacation cruise ships and oil tankers. If you have a blender at home, there's a good chance the blade in that blender carries the sweat of these boys. For days, weeks, months, and sometimes still today, when flashes of memories come back, I'm overwhelmed with heartbreak at the devastation I saw. But so too am I inspired, because I also met many labor activists in Bangladesh who are fighting for these kids and whose work is a little bit easier because they themselves are inspired by the American labor movements that you all know well and that you all, as communicators, are carrying the torch of today. But carrying the torch is not enough. Carrying the torch does not ensure that it remains lit. So if we had time, I was going to pivot here and kind of go into the lessons I've learned on digital marketing and search engine optimization. I was going to show a 15-minute video on how goiam.org can optimize its site, can create a better mobile experience, because I absorb content on goiam.org. It's incredibly important to my wife and I. We read as much as we can on there. And in this modern kind of battle for communication, and Google announced it a few years ago, it's incredibly important to have a super fast site. It means that the stories that I read and get emotional about and love and share start ranking higher in Google, which means more reach, more growth, more new members who are outside of the IAM circle get to experience the stories that I love and that you've done a great job of telling. So rather than do that, I just would ask that I can hang out a bit after. If you want to give me your business card, I can send you the link to the video, and there's a password for it, and I have it all private on my website. And yeah, I think it's really important, and I'm happy to help with the journal and with the website so that we can continue to grow our reach. So thank you. This was my life's greatest honor to be here before you. Thank you, brothers and sisters.